Welcome to the Center for Universal Oneness. We are an open, welcoming, spiritual community that supports all faith traditions and invites you to join us on your spiritual journey. We host different speakers each week to guide and inspire us. We are guided by universal principles of acceptance of all that is sacred, and we strive to live in the oneness of love. Please enjoy this presentation.
Okay, well, this morning we are delighted to have Reverend Donna Johnson back with us. She's familiar to us because we enjoy having her frequently. And her talk today is the Rebel Peacemaker. And Donna is the Senior Minister of Unity in the Valley at Charlotte, Arizona. I hope I said that right.
Close enough.
She's a former president and CEO of Unity Worldwide Ministries, and she's also published her first book. Congratulations, Spirit Spun Wisdom. I look forward to seeing that. Well, maybe you can just make a couple of remarks about what the book is about.
Okay. Well, the book has been published for several years now, I guess. And it's really a compilation of what I used to call my midweek messages. When I was at Unity of Fairfax, which I will talk about today because it's just outside Washington, D.C. So I compiled them all together. People had been asking me for years to create a book, so I finally did. Oddly enough, or it's not oddly, my congregation is writing a book. I've asked for them to submit any stories of transformation or inspiration, and we're compiling a book and having it published as I did mine, and it will be a legacy for years to come, as well as a fundraiser in terms if anyone buys it off Amazon or Kindle or copies to give to their grandkids or whatever. But it's really interesting. It's been good for people to write their stories, and I'm not talking about life stories, just a cameo or an experience here and there. It's been very good, their comments, but the blessing has been in my reading their stories, and because I truly believe in the depth of commitment to spiritual principles that I see in this congregation. So it's a fun project. It's a lot of extra work, but
it's a delightful idea.
Yeah.
Well, it's great that you have folks who are willing to do that.
At first, I said there will be a minimum of 15, and I had maybe 4 people, and I'm thinking, oh, this was a harebrained idea. What have I launched? But then as it moved along, I now have probably 25 stories to get published in one compilation. So there's some excitement around it.
Well, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Are we going to do the song now, Kyle?
Was the song? I thought the song was in between the
you're right.
Meditation and the speech.
You're right. Donna, I think it's time for your meditation.
Okay. All right. Well, let's begin by taking a breath. That always helps me. So I breathe in. Pause for a moment and then breathe out. Do that a couple of times to center my body, to calm my body, center my mind, and to affirm that I am open and receptive to the living Spirit of truth. The one true teacher is the Holy Spirit that is within each of us, circulates within the consciousness of each of us. We yield now to that spirit, knowing that the highest and best is always the intention that we give forth. We move now into our heart space. We feel gratitude for our associations with each other, the people in the past and the people yet to come, because we know we are connected, and not only connected, we are one in essence. And we affirm there is peace in our hearts, peace in our actions, and peace in our world. And so it is. Amen. It was a beautiful slide. I really enjoyed that. Thank you. Well. So it's 9/11 again. And I know we all remember where we were, 9/11. I want to share a little bit about where I was and subsequently some things that transpired after that. At the time, my former husband and I and a friend had just taken a trip to Spain for 2 weeks. It was day 3, my first out of the country trip, if you don't count day trips to Tijuana or Matamoros once. So we were there and exploring Spain. And one afternoon, we were sitting at a beachside cafe drinking cerveza. And our friend was a real estate agent, and he said, I need to go and check my emails. Back then, we had the internet cafes. So we went along the sidewalk a couple of blocks, and next door to this internet cafe was an Irish pub. And as we were walking by, this man, this Irishman, came out and said, "Are you American?" Well, yes, we are. And he said, there was a plane that flew into one of the twin towers of the World Trade Center. And I remember thinking, well, that's really tragic. That's really freakish. Wow. You know, and then he said, and 15 minutes later, another plane flew into the other tower. And now I'm looking at him. He was kind of disheveled, could have used a shower, smelled like Irish whiskey. I looked at him kind of funny. And then he said there was a plane that flew into the Pentagon. And I thought to myself, this guy is off his medicine. You know, he's delusional or whatever. He grabbed me by the arm like this, because I'm sure he could read my thoughts, and yanked me into the cafe. Of course, 2 guys following. And he said, I'm telling you the bloody truth. And he yanked me into the cafe, and there were 3 TVs in there, all replaying over and over again what was happening. To be in a foreign country and see that happening was, I can't even describe it. It's the furthest thing I could ever imagine, ever. Needless to say, that changed our vacation quite a bit. We were going to go to Morocco, decided not to do that. And every morning we were glued to the TV until we went somewhere in the afternoon. We come home in the evening and watch again the TV. So that was a memorable vacation. I love Spain. Spain is beautiful. But I remember the protocol going home was quite different. And when we got home, literally on my knees, kissing the ground. I was particularly concerned because our church was in Fairfax, Virginia. And there were a lot of military people, a lot of state people, all kinds of people. So we were glad to know when we got home that no one we knew personally had been involved. But I remember there was a Navy admiral, my lips don't work today, who took us on a little trip into Washington, D.C., and he drove us past the Pentagon. And there was that gaping hole. It's one thing to see it on TV. It's another thing to see it in person. Again, the energy of seeing that was just tremendous, tremendous. Okay, fast forward 10-year anniversary of 9/11. And it happened to be the day of 9/11, just as this is the day of 9/11. So I was giving the talk and I was talking about how we relive our traumas. And as we relive our traumas, they just go deeper and deeper. And we keep the traumatic experience living on some level within us. That church had 2 services. During this second service, my musician came running up to me on stage and whispered something in my ear. And he said, "Reverend Donna, the Pentagon has been attacked." And I looked at him and I said, "Are you sure?" And he said, yes, his wife had just called him to tell him that. And she had heard it on a special news blast. And everybody's sitting out there, what? So I turned and I told the congregation what had been relayed to me. Instantly, 5 people jump up, run out the back door of the church. So we had a prayer, and I went on with the talk to the extent that I could. But before the talk ended, somebody else came to me up on the platform and said, "Reverend Donna, that was a replay of the 9/11 broadcast." So they were issuing on the radio, Orson Welles, think Orson Welles, you know. So I'm standing there. There were people who were angry with me for that experience, but what do I know? But anyway, that made my point of what I was saying about reliving and reliving and reliving. It's like it's happening now. Today, all over the country, but particularly at the Pentagon, President Biden's at the Pentagon. Kamala Harris, Vice President, is at the World Trade Center. And then there's also things going on in Pennsylvania where people are coming together, and as they did when this happened. And I think that's a beautiful thing. However, I have difficulty because I can see both sides of this. In researching this, I'd like to read something. This is from military.com, a speech that was given. As the towers fell, the Pentagon burned, and the ground smoldered in that field, our nation rallied to stand arm in arm. Each year on 9/11, officially designated as Patriot Day, we stand together again and proclaim, never forget. I get emotional, you know. Never forget. I would have preferred, if I were king of the world, queen of the world, I would have preferred to say we stand together arm in arm and proclaim we can see that this never happens. We can heal the consciousness from which this type of violence comes forth. Wars and wars and rumors of wars and wars and more wars. And I am such a pacifist that it's like, why? War starts with an idea. It's an idea. And then from there, it gets implemented. What is the idea? I don't like the power that you have. I'm going to take it. I want your resources. I want something. So it stems from fear and greed and a sense of powerlessness. When people know their true source of power and what is possible, and I do believe all things are possible, we can shift. We can shift. And I know there are lots of people in the world who do work in the world to bring about peace and to educate people about what is the higher and better way, rather than relying on force, driven again by the desire for power and wealth, just wealth and greed. So what is it that we're never to forget? The horrendous shock of it all? Are we to never forget our fear and hatred of the Muslims? Our fear and hatred of someone who's different from us, who doesn't reflect our culture, even our values? Or could we never forget some of the key teachings that Jesus gave us? If you want to know what the teachings of Jesus are, you can see it in Matthew chapter 5. And specifically, I would like to talk about the Beatitudes. And the first one is, "Blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted." I am willing to accept that comfort. I'm willing to accept that comfort by not reliving the horror of not only 9/11, but all of the people who are grieving, and their hearts will never be the same because of their children being killed in our schools, drive-by shootings, you name it. For whatever reason, that reason is never good enough. It is just never good enough. Blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted. And so I accept that comfort by letting go of the past to the degree I won't forget it, but I won't relive it if I can help it. And here are the other two that I'd like to touch on. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. Peacemakers. Who are the peacemakers? Was Jesus a peacemaker? Not always. As a matter of fact, we tend to focus so much on the warm, fuzzy feelings, we often don't take into account the rebel side of Jesus. The time that he was angry and overthrew the tables in the temple, and all the times he had to basically run for his life or slide out of the picture because he knew he was a marked person from the beginning. Why? Because he had different ideas. Jesus started a revolution, but he never killed anybody. He never harmed anybody. He never incited violence of an us against them for any reason. His revolution was a revolution of consciousness. His revolution was about ideas, planting ideas that helped people to live their life in a different way, a life of freedom, a life of prosperity, a life of faith, a life ultimately of joy. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. We are all that. However, when we embody it, then we truly are. We will find a way to work through our differences that don't require war or violence. But that means we take care of the wars inside of ourselves. And now we get to, blessed are the merciful, for they shall know mercy. They will have mercy. The merciful. In spite of the tremendous pain inflicted from time to time, in spite of that, we have to find a way to let it go. If we keep dragging it forward, it will always be a part of us. And yes, it's part of our human experience, but it is not part of our spiritual being of who we are. You know, Martin Luther King is famous for saying, hate will not drive out hate, only love can do that. And darkness cannot drive out darkness, only the light can do that. That is the merciful, to be able to forgive even when the wound is raw, still to forgive and be willing to move past it. We'll never solve the problem at the same consciousness through which the problem was created. So here we are. I cried the day Russia invaded Ukraine. I have a very dear friend whose wife is Ukrainian, who has a 26-year-old son. He was this close to coming to America to be a citizen, as his mother is, when the war happened. And immediately all the young men were ordered to stay in Ukraine. So far, he's still safe. But I look at this and I'm thinking, why? Why? Well, because I want that land. I want its resources. And I want power from my perspective. I ask, why did 9/11 happen too? Why were we attacked? Just because people don't like Americans? Is that it? All I could find about that is that Osama bin Laden sent a letter that said he did not like the way Americans treated Muslims in countries where Muslims live. Somalia was one. I'm trying to remember them, but anyway, Somalia was one. Oh, Iraq, imagine that. And he didn't like Afghanistan war, our presence there and our presence elsewhere. So that was his solution. Let's just teach us a lesson, right? The lesson that it taught us, number one, don't take our freedom for granted. Number two, expect war. I think that's one of the unstated things. Always be prepared, like Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts. Yes, but let us not create it in thought, because what we hold up here comes out here. And that is a spiritual principle, a quantum principle. So my prayer for us, for all people everywhere, is to realize it doesn't have to be this way. And when we come together to remember and mourn the loss of people just going to work and doing their jobs, we can have compassion for the families and friends. We can never forget the love we've had for them, but also never forget we have the power, not the force, the power within us to see that it never happens again and that we never perpetrate it. It's not just about not happening to us. It's about the golden rule. So I want to conclude this with this Lao Tzu quote that I love, and I'm sure many of you know. If there is to be peace in the world, there must be peace in the nations. Pray for that. If there is to be peace in the nations, there must be peace in the cities. If there is to be peace in the cities, There must be peace between neighbors. If there is to be peace between neighbors, there must be peace in the home. If there is to be peace in the home, there must be peace in the heart. And that is the core of the whole message. That's it. Thank you for letting me speak today.